Welcome to the Art and Science of Complex Sales, proudly presented by Membrane. This podcast is your gateway to mastering the craft of modern selling. If you're passionate about growth, impact, and unlocking your full potential in sales and revenue, you're in the right place. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And now let's get started with today's guest. Today's guest was telling a friend of his around his book idea, and a friend said, Mike, do we really need another sales book? After understanding guide selling, the methodology, and the book, I can definitively say, Mike, yes, we did. Great work, my friend. Today, we're talking with Michael Koory, CEO of Blue SalesFly and author of the new book, Guide Selling. Let's talk with him, get into the book, and understand how he's trying to make an impact on the world of sales. Michael, welcome. It's
Hello.
so good to see you, my man.
It's great to be seen.
It is. It's better than the alternative.
It's exactly. Seen is better than viewed at this stage of the game.
Well, how are you? You got some exciting news for us. I'm pretty pumped about this.
I'm super excited. Yeah, it's been a great week. I'm very excited for today's discussion and very excited that the book's finally out.
Wait, the book. Okay. What is that? The book. What is the book, my man?
The Guide Selling System. It's my newest book, only first book, just out this week. So
Congratulations.
I'm excited.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
That's really cool.
Thank you.
Weren't you telling me before, I think we had that conversation when you were writing it, that you were going to title it not another sales book or not another tech sales book or something like that?
Well, yeah. So the tagline at the top of the book from a good friend of mine when I told him I was doing this, and I have to put the right context because it's funnier with the right context. This guy's a huge advocate of sales, like you and I, a huge advocate of sales, even though I point out some tough truths. I'm a firm believer that sales is about problem solving for your customer and helping your customer move from where they are to where they ultimately want to be. And, but there's a lot of bad advice out there. So, when I told him I was writing this book, his quote was, Mike, the last thing this world needs is another book about sales. And I said, I love that. I said, can I have that quote to put on the cover of the book?
I'm actually going to put the fact that you don't want another sales book on the cover of my sales book, because it's not a sales book, quite frank. I mean, well, it is. Let's do that. It is one, but you're taking a very different direction, and let's start to dive into that, because I love your perspective on it, and you're really outlining that in the book. So give me the overview.
Yeah. So it's a book about selling, but actually how you can serve your customers better by showing up in a different manner that allows business to happen for them and for you. So I should also stay with a little bit of the context that I love, irony and a play on words. So I call it the guide selling system. So, showing up as a guide instead of showing up as a salesperson. And then the other key is looking at it as a system, because systems thinking and adding quality measures into everything it's ever done, from manufacturing to agile software development to all the quality systems, we have to begin looking at this as the business development function as a system, because it's the only way you can create measures, processes to allow it to get better. But in all my years, and even in the years in sales, marketing, product development, product management, sales leadership, there were some very consistent issues with or problem areas where salespeople showed up. They often don't do a really good discovery. They often don't do very good qualification. And because of the nature of selling, the feeling that you have to sell something, that causes us to have happy years, that causes us not to ask some of the tough questions. And when I reflected on what it really is about, which is it's about getting your customer from where they're at, helping them to truly understand where they're at and decide the best way to get them to where they want to be. Well, our role as a sales professional is to help point out those obstacles that they may not have thought of or they may not see, and ask some of those tough questions. Well, if I feel like I have to sell you something and I feel like I need to have you like me, and because if you don't like me, you're not going to want to talk to me, then I'm not going to be in the right mindset to ask you some of those questions and to really earn your trust to ask you those questions. But if I see my role as helping you move from where you are, whether that's in pain or lack of opportunity, or there's threats to your business that you don't know about, to where you ultimately want to be, if I see my role as guiding you there, then all of that baggage falls away. I'm going to be more concerned with moving you than I am with me selling you something. So if nothing else, like that's just the fundamental, and it's a simple mind shift that needs some steps to take place, but that's the hallmark of it. And then the next step is putting a system that enables that behavior to happen.
So leadership's responsibility is to set that system. How does your book help them with that? Like, what exactly are you laying out in the book that can help somebody define the system all the way down through the consistent actions we need to be taking to change how we sell?
Yeah, great question. So I'll take a step back. When I looked at all the problems, like when I left my employer and then left the partnership, I was sitting out west with no job, no business, no prospects, and I did what every smart person in that role would do. I took my family on vacation, and I was reflecting on what I did poorly and what I did well, and where I saw opportunities. And the knots, as I like to call them, sales knots, as in what's not working, they were at all levels, right? So, companies are struggling because they can't grow. Customers are struggling because they got people showing up not adding value, and reps are struggling because they're like, what the heck do I do? So in the book, I lay out, you really have to start with what are the cultural elements of your company? What's the strategic value? How do you really help solve problems? And you start to identify that. And I use a workshop that I call the TOPO map. So if we're going to be guiding, kind of using the map symbol on the front, a guide has to know the topography of the environment. And TOPO it's a different take on words. I love play on words, by the way, if you can't tell so far. TOPO stands for threats, opportunities. I'm sorry, no, it doesn't. It stands for threats, obstacles, problems, and opportunities. So you literally list out, what are the threats to your customer? If their business were in danger, or if they have a competitive problem, what are the threats that could really hurt them? What are the obstacles that are in their way? Maybe they don't understand sales process. Maybe they don't have the right sales leader. Maybe they haven't worked out all their messages. What are the problems that are involved with that? And then what are the opportunities? So you list all those things down. Well, those are the key problems that you solve. So that should be the questioning orientation that you build into your sales process, so that your team is showing up in a way and they're equipped to ask real business problems. I can't remember who said it, but they came up with the idea that nobody buys a drill. You buy the hole in the wall that you need. Mm-hmm. And that shift, and that's not original to me, but having a process to then think of that first, and then that's how you're going to build your questioning. That's how you're going to build how you show up. That's how you're going to build your messaging. And all of those elements then have to be built into a sales process. So the other part in the book, how I help, is the guide selling system is built around the guide sales process. And, I changed the approach because when I did the research, and one of the other areas that customers always complained about were discovery calls. They felt and if you think about, how I was trained in some that was, some methods that were good and some that weren't so good, discovery really was about trying to find a lever that you could, get a toehold to, try to convince them to do something. Well, the stages that I put in were greet, understand, impact, decide, and elevate. Thank you, Membrane, for elevate. Uh, because now I can show up a greeting. We're going to show up as more human. We're going to figure out, is there a problem that they want to solve? The very first meeting, you show up just trying to determine, is there something that you can solve for them? And is it worth, do they want help solving it? And is it worth talking further? The next phase then goes into understand. And I used understand and impact instead of discover and qualify. Because again, one of the issues I saw with salespeople is like, if I'm trying to go through this discovery process to find a hook, I'm not really listening to the customer. And one of the biggest problems that customers complain about is that the reps aren't listening. I struggled with that with myself early on in the career, because I'm trying to find that hook. But if you just,
I'm going to interrupt you there for a second, but I love that change between discovery is the mechanism by which we understand, but if discovery is the end goal just for discovery's sake, and if we're just listening for keywords, I remember early on in my sales leadership career, I had a guy that he loved objection handling. It was his favorite thing in the world. Like he just dug it, and he described it as, oh man, as soon as they give me this objection, I know that I'm on, right? I'm on fire. I can respond in this way, and he made it almost performative, where it's like, oh, if cost comes up, I know exactly what I'm going to say, and I'm going to say that every time, and I just am able to do it. And there was a school of thinking back, that was the way to do it, right? You'd listen to keywords, and then it was just bam, response. I'd have an answer to everything, and that's how you were confident. But the truth of the matter is those objection handlings failed most of the time, right? Even though I felt really good about the response. And I think that's the same way a lot of times what you're describing in terms of how people have responded to discovery. Oh, you're just waiting for me to say something.
right.
And instead of, let's actually understand what the heck is going on in the business. Like my goal is just, I'm going to learn what's going on in the business. If I can help, I can help. If I can't, I can't. But I love that shift and the way you've described that. So it's forcing, understanding is the goal. Discovery is not.
Exactly. Thank you. And you nailed it. I mean, discovery is not a bad thing, but the goal of discovery should really be understanding. So let's just start with that. And and I remember the objection, school of approach. One of the other problems is, we really you have to get to a level of trust if they're really going to let down the guard on what's going on. And they're not going to do that if they don't trust you. Ultimately, they do have to, they're going to like you, because no one's going to do a complex 6-month engagement. And this is, my book was mostly around complex sales, because that's been my career, but it works even for shorter ones. But the other thing that, and you brought up a great point, if you're going from the school of objection handling and you're going from the focus of selling, you're doing something to the client, and you nailed it. It's performative. Instead of, a guide is going to sit back and understand where's the client at? Do they have the team? Do they have the bandwidth to take this project on right now? Do they have the budget? Are they emotionally ready? Is there somebody on their team that might not want this to happen? Because internal politics never play a role in these big,
Never.
budgetary expenses. Never. So the guide is sitting back to decide, can I really help them? And that understanding, the goal of that, stage is twofold. You want to have mutual understanding, so the client really knows where they're at, and then you as the guide or the salesperson really know where they're at. Because when that happens, and I know you've been in the room, like when you have that real understanding and you've got that trust, you feel that shift. You feel them, they lean in, the guards lowered, and they like, so Paul, you understand exactly what we're dealing with. Can you help? That's when it gets real. And until you get to that point where it's real, that you can truly talk about. So, if this doesn't get corrected, what's that going to do for you? Like, what's life going to be like? And they're not going to reveal that until there's a level of trust and a level of mutual understanding.
We did together. It was really a fun call, but we have a mutual client that we went into a whiteboard session with hey, let's figure this out. Right. And that was so much fun. I didn't know what the end goal was going to be out of that. But it's so much fun to do that. And to not be, and then to turn around and assemble, which I'm sure the impact, like you start to assemble the solution that actually, especially in these complex sales, is actually relevant
It's huge.
at the cost that can be, if your organization provides value, it's at the cost that you can do it at or not, right? I mean, but it's a very different way of. I like that just discovery, understanding. When you make understanding the goal, it's really critical. And I'm probably talking too much on this. It's your book, but it's just really helpful for me.
Yeah. Well, and I've found it to be helpful to other people because it takes the pressure off. All of society has been so negatively stereotyped around sales, but yet we all know, you and I could probably name dozens of top performing salespeople that are truly valued by their clients. Mm-hmm. And if you think of complexity is only continuing to ramp up, and with AI and with all the stuff that's going on in the world, we're not going to go into a less complex time. And who is best suited to help customers navigate moving forward? It's the business development people. It's the sales people, because these companies have great products and solutions that can truly impact the lives of the people working, the customers and their lives and their businesses. So that should be our responsibility, is like, hey, I see this potential customer in need. Am I the best one to help them, or is Paul the best one to help them? And I have a client right now that, they had one of those type sales guys. And he said, Mike, I got 80% of my current customers that I have to turn over because they're bad, but I have to keep them because right now I need the overhead, but they're low margin. They're not nice to my people. They're highly demanding. We can get business that is bad. And, one of the first things I tell my customers is, look, not everybody gets to work with you. And we should view it that way, not in with an element of hubris, but an element of understanding. Like, can I really help them the way they need to be helped? And we know all this stuff about our products and services, but we also really need, and this is what that TOPO process is supposed to uncover, we should understand all the things around the product and service that has to do with storage, shipping and delivery, carrying costs, what efficiencies they might get in the future. Like, we really have to be that guide that is well equipped to help them navigate that, even to the point of like, hey, at this sales process, we're going to talk about or at this stage of the process, we're going to talk about some uncomfortable stuff. There's probably some people in your organization that might not like this. Here's why we got to do it. What do you think? Buyers want agency. That's one of the biggest, I think that was one of the biggest shifts that came out of COVID, is that, once people started having more control over their lives, and then also seeing those areas where control was taken away, people want a level of agency. They want to co-create that value. And again, if we're just forcing something on them, doing something to them instead of with them, they pull back.
Well, Mike, you've been dead on in the thoughts we talked about today, and I have a preview of this. We've worked on this together as you've been developing it, and I'm really excited to be a part of that. It's extremely cool stuff, and I know your clients are already well receiving this, right? In terms of the people you're working with, but how do other people get access to the book and access to working with you?
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Well, and a plug for Membrane, if that's allowed on your podcast. The other part of it is you have to have a system. So you can take all of that great, behavioral stuff. If you don't put it in a system that you can use every day and that it reinforces every day, it goes out the window. We have a retention rate of 72 hours to maybe 85 hours for the people smarter than me. But all of the training I went through in companies previous, we would go get this great training. It was never put into the sales process. Leadership often wasn't trained on it. They were out, on a phone in the lobby, doing deals. You've got to put it in a system, and that system needs to be something that is flexible enough and has a great ability. And that's where Membrane's been a great partner, making this live and actionable. That's the sticking point. So, show up different and then put it in a system that the team can use every day.
Oh, yeah. And to preview, this is really cool stuff. You're going to have a template. The guide process and the guide selling is going to be templated. So then you can then take that and change that and put it into everybody's instance that you work with. So it's really cool stuff. This is not about us though. This is about you. How do people, find that book and get in touch with you?
Yeah. Well, yeah, thank you. But it is really cool stuff. So it's available on Amazon. If you just search the guide selling system on Amazon, you'll find it. You can find me on LinkedIn, or I have a real hard email, Mike@bluesalesfly.com. And that's the color blue, sales, SALES, fly.com. And I'm grateful. I appreciate.
And that does come from your trip out when you took that vacation, right? Weren't you doing some fly fishing at that time?
Well, yeah, so when I was sitting there journaling and praying in the morning, like, all right, now that you have no business, no clients, no job, what the heck are you going to do? And we were in Grand Lake, Colorado, and I was pondering all the problems, pondering again what I failed at, what I did well at, and a fly fishing guide drives by. And then I see a tour guide go by. Then there were hiking guides that we ran into. And, the realization is that, we're all in some level of transformation. And ideally, we're getting our clients to move from where they are to where they want to be. And we're helping them navigate the obstacles involved with that. And so, guiding, I like blue sky thinking. So that's where the blue comes from, sales. I obviously love sales. And, I'm a terrible fly fisherman. If I can share one more quick story.
Yeah.
The idea of sales knots, as in what's not working for you. I was fly fishing with my son and son-in-law, and I tend to overcast. And so I am really good at catching oaks and maples and shrubs and logs. And my son,
I've caught an oak fish before too. It's amazing.
They're really hard to land. Really hard to land.
It is. I made my desk out of it.
So my flies are usually all knotted up. And so I was in a bush taking my fly out again. And my son and son-in-law are up the river, just cracking up, having a blast, catching fish after fish. And I'm like, here I am, taking another knot out, and I'm not fishing. And I just, again, play on words. I thought, hey, that's what happens to sales. We get all knotted up, in the stuff that isn't really helping us because we don't have a system to follow, or, we don't have good messaging, or we don't know what we're, in my case, we don't know what we're doing. And so the simple approach of, sales knots is like, all right, what's not working for you? How can we untangle that? Because I love to help people untangle sales knots. So,
and you've lived it. Thank you for telling that story, because you have lived it, and that's one of the things I truly respect about your approach and you, and really appreciate, is that you've lived it. You've been on the down and outside. You've been on the upside of it, and you're taking everything that you've learned through that and putting it somewhere to serve others. So Godspeed with this, man. With
Thank
the
you.
wind at your back. And please, everybody that's listening to this, make sure that you're going to Amazon, checking out the book, Guide Selling. Make sure you're checking out Mike on LinkedIn, Blue SalesFly. And you can always ping me. If you want to ping me, I can get you in connection with Mike and make sure that you are connected. And if you have any issues, we will make sure that we discover to understand, not to sell. So
seek first to understand,
then be understood.
I didn't write
Thank
that
you,
one,
Stephen.
but it's pretty darn good. Yes, thank you, Stephen Covey.
Yes. All right. Well, with that, thank you, everybody. We will talk to you soon. As always, keep shining bright. Have a brilliant day and sell well. Talk soon.